Welcome again. My name is Dave Marx, and today we'll be hearing from Kira Asatryan. Kira's a relationship coach, author, blogger, and loneliness expert. She calls loneliness a problem of epidemic proportions in our modern times, and writes about this topic for various online blogs, including Time, Psychology Today, Psych Central, and Elite Daily. She spent her career researching, pondering, and reflecting upon what specifically makes relationships good or bad. And now she's taken all that knowledge and published her first book, Stop Being Lonely, 3 Simple Steps to Developing Close Friendships and Deep Relationships. So we've been lucky to get some subsidized copies through Google for her talk today, so please pick one up in the back of the room before you go. And I'm sure she'd be happy to sign it for you if you could stick around for a few minutes after the talk. And so with that, I'd like to introduce to you, Kira.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Hello, everyone on the internet. I don't have any slides or anything. I just am going to talk a little bit because I want everybody who's listening to this to kind of get the gist of what Stop Being Lonely is about, even if you don't end up reading it. So I figured I'd start by just talking a little bit about how Stop Being Lonely came to be. When I started writing it, my only goal was really to write the book that would have helped me in my own social life about 10 years ago. I'm 32 now, and my loneliest period of my life was in college, which felt very weird and unusual at the time. I found out now that it's actually not that unusual. But at the time, I really would have liked to have had a book like Stop Being Lonely. I have really dealt with loneliness my whole life. I felt it for as long as I can remember, really. And I would also say that it's fair that I've dealt with my own fair share of shyness and social anxiety, which of course can co-occur with loneliness. But the issue for me was not really that I was afraid to interact with people, which is kind of the hallmark of social anxiety. Most of the feedback that I got from people was positive. Most people thought I was generally nice and sweet. So I didn't really avoid people because I feared their judgment. I avoided people because I didn't really enjoy interacting with them that much, at least not as much as everyone else seemed to. And this really bothered me because I would tend to isolate myself and then I would become extremely lonely when I was alone. And I thought, what was wrong with me? Part of what compounded my frustration with my own loneliness was that there wasn't a terribly good reason for me to be lonely. I have a really nice family. In high school, I had people I could sit with at lunch. And as an adult, I had boyfriends and acquaintances. And I just thought, shouldn't these relationships be enough? But no matter how many people I could put on my objective list of people in my life, the same thing always really bothered me. I didn't know what it was that made some relationships feel good and others feel not so good. I didn't understand why some of my interactions with some people were loneliness remedies, while others felt like loneliness intensifiers. I really wanted to understand the root cause of what made me feel close to certain people and not close to other people. This was really the central issue for me. Because not knowing what caused that feeling of closeness made every interaction with every person feel risky, something to be avoided. So in 2013, I left my very techie job. I was a performance marketer and I did growth at various Facebook app companies. I ran Facebook ads in an attempt to sort of answer some of these questions for myself. And I became a relationship coach and mediator. I spent the first 2 years of those, roughly 3 years that it's been, researching the science of intimate relationships. And I can summarize what science has to say about relationships in 2 words. They're complicated. And what I mean by that is this. Science has pinpointed tons and tons and tons of things that you're supposed to do to have a good relationship with someone. You're supposed to show empathy. You're supposed to self-disclose, meaning talk about yourself, but not too much. You're supposed to offer practical assistance, but not right away. You're supposed to develop interdependence, but not prematurely. That's bad. And so on and so forth. And while it all kind of made sense to me, my next thought was, can anybody really do all of this stuff? To me, this laundry list of things you're supposed to have and things you're supposed to do in relationships, things you're supposed to have like trust, communication, et cetera, just seemed really, really complex to put into practice. And in real life interactions, especially if you have any amount of social anxiety, it's extremely hard to recall complexities around what you are and are not supposed to do around other people, or what you are and are not supposed to say to people. In fact, in my own experience, convoluted do this, don't do that advice makes social anxiety worse. So I asked myself, is there any way to make this simple? Is there a way to streamline what real research says about relationships and sum it all up in some kind of practical way? I sat with this question for a long time, and then the answer just kind of came to me, as answers sometimes do. And the answer to me was this: knowing plus caring equals closeness. Closeness, which is the real focus of Stop Being Lonely, is that thing that makes some relationships feel good and others not feel good. It's the ingredient that makes the difference between an interaction from which you walk away feeling more lonely or less lonely. It is really, for all intents and purposes, the antidote to loneliness. And it's created through just two things: knowing and caring. All of those scientifically proven bits of good relationship stuff can pretty elegantly fit into these two categories. And what I like about this formula, so to speak, is that it's very easy to remember. All you really have to do in a social situation is ask yourself, should I be trying to know this person or care about them? So before I dive into what that really means and what it looks like in real life, I want to circle back to loneliness for a second. Because loneliness these days is really, really weird. In another time and place, you would not really feel that lonely unless you did something wrong or for some reason were shunned by your people. But today, loneliness is extremely frustrating and confusing for many people. And the first thing that's become abundantly clear to me through my work and my own life experience is that modern day loneliness is not caused by a lack of people in one's life. Now, of course, literal social isolation can cause loneliness, and social isolation comes with its own, list of issues. If you live out in a cabin somewhere by yourself, or you live in a very sparsely populated town or something like that, loneliness is going to be something that comes along with that. But there are a plethora of studies that show that one person can be physically alone, even for a pretty long time, and feel totally fine, while another person can have hundreds of friends and feel desperately lonely. So if loneliness and aloneness are not the same thing, then what is loneliness? Well, first, it's a feeling. It's not an objective state of being like aloneness is. And it's actually a feeling that's kind of hard to define. Science has a lot of different definitions for what loneliness actually is. And when it comes down to it, it's kind of just one of those you feel it when you feel it feelings. So for a moment, I want to take myself back to high school. As I mentioned earlier, I had people to sit with at lunch, and I was invited to my fair share of social activities in high school. And if somebody had asked my teachers, does Kira have friends? They would have said, yes, she has friends. But one day when I was in the 9th grade, I had a freak accident with a horse, and I broke my shoulder and arm into 16 pieces. And I had to have a surgery that's only ever performed on adult male rugby players. In fact, my surgeon had to delay the surgery for a week so that he could go learn how to do it. So it was kind of scary stuff for a 13-year-old. And to my anguish, it seemed to me that none of my friends really cared. Of course, they noticed that I was gone for a while. But once the story of what had happened circulated, it seemed to me that their curiosity was quenched. They figured they'd talk to me about it when they got back, and they knew I was basically okay. But the lack of seeming concern broke my heart. It was then that I felt the distinction between having friends and feeling close. And in our modern world, I think that this distinction between literal aloneness, or having no friends, and the subjective feeling of loneliness is becoming ever more obvious. Everyone has Facebook friends. Everyone has a phone full of contacts that they could theoretically contact about anything at any time. But do we actually do this? And does it really matter? Personal technology, specifically the internet and mobile phones, has made it so that we have people available to us all the time, at least in theory. We never really need to lose contact with someone, and if we do, technology makes it so that we can meet someone new. In many ways, we have less literal aloneness than any other people have ever had. And yet, despite this forever connectedness, levels of loneliness are rising across the entire Western world. At any given moment, 1 in 5 Americans, that's 60 million people, is feeling lonely. And that's up at least 30% since the 80s, at least 30%. So what does that mean? I see these two things taken together, that we have less aloneness and yet more loneliness, to mean that it's not experientially enough to have people around you. And the goal should not be to have more contacts in your phone or more social media connections. The goal should be to replace the negative experience of loneliness with the very positive experience of closeness. Or to put it another way, it's about quality, not quantity. How one perceives the quality of one's relationships is vastly more important than the number of relationships that one has. And to really feel the difference between quality and quantity, I want to do a tiny little visualization, because I'm a coach and we do stuff like this. So close your eyes for a second. Imagine that you're eating a piece of stale bread. Now imagine that you're eating the most delicious meal you've ever eaten. Do you feel the difference? Okay, you can open your eyes. My point is that the difference is not a functional difference. Both stale bread and a delicious meal satisfy real hunger. The difference is qualitative. The difference is in the amount of pleasure you derive from the experience. In my opinion, when we're lonely, we're not starving for human interaction and just ready to take anything we can get. We're hungry for a certain pleasurable experience. We're hungry for a little bit of closeness. So let's talk about closeness and how to create it in your life. The word closeness has a lot of different definitions in the social sciences, but in my world, it has a very specific definition. It means the experience of having direct access to another person's inner world, to her dreams, her fears, her habits, her preferences, etc. Once you have direct access to another person's inner world, you can sit next to her and know what she's thinking. You can look into her eyes and feel what she's feeling. And as I've said, this is created through knowing and caring. Knowing, as I define it, means being able to see someone's life from their own perspective. And caring means expressing interest and investment in that person's well-being. So let's talk a little about knowing. Knowing, in the sense that I use it, is actually pretty different from how we usually know people. We tend to think we know someone when we've interacted with them a lot and developed a theory of how they are. My cousin Lisa is a total pushover. My old boss had anger issues. My best friend is the most dependable person in the world. While these things may be true for me, as you can probably see, they are evaluations that I have made of this other person. They're my perceptions. Take the last example of my best friend. I may experience her as being dependable, but from her perspective, she may experience her own dependability as anxiety about not wanting to let anybody down. And until I understand this difference, until I understand her experience of her own dependability from her perspective, I don't really know her in a way that makes her feel close to me. In the same way, the way that I define caring is kind of different than how we usually try to care about people. In our culture, we usually show caring by either worrying about someone or trying to give them advice. And unfortunately, neither one of these mechanics work that well for creating closeness. Giving advice, which is usually really well-intentioned, doesn't work that well because it actually places you in a superior position as the one who knows things or the one who can fix things for the other person. which actually kind of seeds resentment in them. Expressing concern through worrying doesn't really work that well either, because it prompts the other person to try to prove that everything is okay with them to ease your discomfort. Instead, the kind of caring that I talk about is just the act of simply expressing interest and concern and investment in the other person's well-being. And it opens the door for emotional connection. It says to the other person, I'm here, I'm listening to you. What would you like to say? Together, knowing and caring work well because they are a powerful combination. They communicate, not only do I really see you, I'm listening to you. Not only do I understand you, I also value you. So have you ever had that experience where you learn a new word and then you start hearing it everywhere? That's kind of what happened to me after I came up with this knowing plus caring equals closeness thing. I started seeing it pop up all over the place in the unconscious phrasing of some of the most famous relationship experts. Is anybody here familiar with the 5 love languages? It's like the most famous love book out there. In it, Gary Chapman says, with verbal encouragement, we are trying to communicate, I know, I care, how can I help? Psychologist, researcher, and best-selling author John Gottman, and he's also my personal crush, ends an anecdote from his book, What Makes Love Last, by saying, a husband I once helped came to accept that he cannot control what his wife feels, and that it's not his job to get her to cheer up, calm down, or develop a sense of humor. All she needs is for him to know her and care. The type of loneliness that most of us are experiencing these days is fundamentally an internal loneliness, a loneliness of the heart and mind. Knowing someone well and caring about them deeply creates a mental and emotional closeness, or a closeness of the heart and mind. And by eliminating this internal distance, closeness eliminates the sadness that comes with it, also known as loneliness. In this way, closeness acts as the opposite of loneliness and the antidote to its effects. So to wrap things up, just one more thing, and this thing is important. Closeness is something that is within your control to create with anyone who also wants it. So it really is something that you can start having now. So what could you do to start feeling less lonely right now? So I will save you any icebreakers or friendship pickup lines, which sometimes people ask me for, and instead just talk about something quickly from the book. It's an idea called separate the person from the problem. And I didn't come up with it, it's from business negotiation. The premise of separate the person from the problem is that to maintain positive relationships during hard times, one must think of people and problems as separate entities. In other words, it's easier to come up with a resolution with someone when you don't view them as the problem. Once you make this distinction, you can treat the person with love and respect and thoroughly eliminate the problem. So one thing you can do right now to start feeling less lonely is to start separating yourself from the problem of loneliness. You are really not to blame if you're feeling lonely. You are a precious person who is deserving of love and closeness, and loneliness is a problem outside of you that can be thoroughly eliminated. And that's all I have.
So for those of you who haven't read the book yet, Stop Being Lonely, it's great. I mean, Kira only talked about just a small portion of what she goes into in there, and I really like how at the end of each chapter you give the really practical tips, that people can start employing today, even, on how to break it down into littler steps, because it's a little overwhelming,
It's a lot. It can be a lot, yeah.
Right. So I guess my first question for you is the role technology plays. I think you emphasize a lot in your book that modern day technology and its efficiencies gives us a little bit of technology brain and makes us all less comfortable with wasting time or inefficient steps. Now, I definitely feel that in new friendships or potentially dating, that unless I'm really into it or I think it has a great chance of panning out, I'm scared to use my limited time and energy on that. How do you recommend people with the technology brain find the balance, and balance between getting out there and not wasting our time and energy, or overcoming that fear?
Yeah, so the thing that you're referencing is that I talk about how the more that we interact with our devices that are designed to be supremely efficient, it's kind of like the less patience you have for real life interaction with real people. And I would say the first step is just kind of understanding that idea. So developing awareness that like, okay, I might be being a little impatient right now, or I am not getting the results that I expected, so I don't want to do it. It's kind of a results-oriented mentality that a lot of people are developing, but human relationships are just not that clean, Yeah, so that would be the first thing, develop awareness about it. And then, kind of go with it. Meaning hold the thing that hold the outcome more loosely. Because especially dating's a great example. If you go into thinking, I understand who this person is and this is what I want out of this date, you are probably going to be disappointed.
Right. So being a little more patient and less focused on a specific outcome.
Right.
Take it as it comes. I like that. And that's pretty wise. I'd like to pitch it over to in-room. Anyone like to hop up and ask a question?
So how can you tell if someone is lonely if the facade of them doesn't seem to be lonely?
How can you tell if someone else is lonely?
That's right.
Oh,
And
I don't know if I've ever thought about that.
more specifically, a 12-year-old, my daughter.
So I was doing another talk the other day, and we were starting to talk about teenagers, and they are lonely. There's one of the big spikes that we see in sort of demographics is 15 to 22. So she's a little younger than that, but they are having issues with this. I think that this is sort of just my speculation, but I think what's going on with a lot of people of that age is that they've grown up with this kind of like public life. Like a lot of them have a public persona that they've developed, which is really weird for like a young teenager to have that. And so they've become fiercely protective of their private lives. So much so that I think they might be having a little bit of a hard time getting to know each other. Because the average 15-year-old or 12-year-old is just very, very private. So how can you tell if they're lonely? I mean, I would just try to be present with her, and if there are moments when she starts to open up, like be available for it. Yeah, but it's kind of a hard situation in that age range.
Kira, in reference to that, I thought one of the best parts of your post was about asking open-ended questions. Could you maybe pitch an open-ended question you could ask to someone to get to know them a little better, or maybe get them to open up about their potential loneliness?
Oh yeah, there's lots of them. Well, my favorite one that I talk about in the book, because it's just my favorite, is what does that get you? And you can ask it in kind of any situation, but what it's for is, like, let's say that somebody is thinking of, changing careers. What does that get you? Or they're thinking of buying a house. What does that get you? And the purpose of the open-ended question is to go from this kind of surface layer that a lot of us talk on about like what we're doing, what we're working on, what's going on, and go one layer deeper into what we're hoping to achieve, or what's motivating these decisions, or just what are you trying to get out of what you're doing with your life, because that's really who the person is. You know what I mean?
There was an interesting thing you said sort of near the end. It was, if I captured it right, closeness is within your control to create with anyone else who wants it, and that latter part really struck me. So it's another question sort of about how do you read someone else and get a sense of who people are who are ready and actually interested in real closeness, and those who may not be ready for it?
That's a great question. That's an excellent question. My first thing I would say is you're not going to know instantly. But you can know within, I would say, 1 or 2 interactions with them, like real interactions, like a one-on-one coffee date or something. You can tell if somebody is a good, what I call, closeness partner. And the way that you kind of vet that out is, do they have the basic skills to do knowing and caring? And so on the knowing side, it would be, are they willing to reveal anything about themselves? And are they interested in getting to know anything about you? So, if somebody's feeling very, People who feel very vulnerable in these situations tend to keep everything to themselves. That person might not be great at this type of stuff. And then on the caring side, it's about emotional capacity. So does it seem like they can empathize with you? Do they use feeling language for anything? Like, I love my job, I can't wait to see my mom, I like her so much, whatever. Like, do they show emotional capacity in any way? Those would be the two things.
Thanks.
Sure.
In your book, you say, my favorite social experiment in learning to pick partners can be found on your TV Monday nights at 8 p.m. It's called The Bachelor. And you go on to say, like, The Bachelor isn't the best at making marriages, but it is really good at this one thing of making people feel like they're falling in love. Right?
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff to me. I also talk about Kim Kardashian. There's some stuff in there like that.
And so what are the, other than like awesome free dates, like what are the environments that create the feeling of falling in love? And is there anything we can take from that to apply to our personal lives of like, to perhaps really use those to fall in love?
Mm-hmm. Well, the big thing that I think The Bachelor gets right is that people are going there with the intention to get to know the people there. It's a fascinating experiment for me because they're encouraged to get to know each other and develop caring for one another, but they can't go straight to the end. Like, they can't, get married on the first show. They're actually not allowed to do that. So it's this kind of like paced thing that actually works pretty well. Like, most of them develop a lot of closeness with each other. At least, the last couple of contestants at the end feel very, very close to the Bachelor or the Bachelorette.
And so you say the number one thing that causes that is the intention. They come in with the intention of getting close.
Yeah.
So we need to find people that want to get close to us, I guess, right? What are some signs you might be able to look for, I guess?
Somebody who wants to get close to you?
Yeah.
Well, if you're in certain environments, opportunities will kind of present themselves. Like, I think Google is actually a good example. If you work at Google, there's probably people around you who would be interested in being closer to you. If you're very, very isolated, it's more difficult. But I would say anybody who approaches you to talk about anything outside of work is probably interested in getting to know you as a person.
I have one, actually. I don't know if I can articulate it very well, so you'll have to bear with me. So the gentleman who asked about his daughter actually kind of gave me a vehicle to ask this question. So you mentioned, quality over quantity, right? So let's extrapolate that for a moment. So, we have, 1,000 Facebook friends, that's quantity. But if we can find 5 or 10 friends with whom we have that intimacy, that caring you described, we're probably doing better. If we take that further, though, because I will attest to, like maybe on a Friday going out with a very good friend and having like a nice conversation with them and feeling cared for, but still can sometimes go home and still feel a little empty even after that interaction. If you can have even one friend who really kind of gets you, that can be kind of cool. So where I'm going with this is that friend might be you, perhaps. And the reason is with, you mentioned the public persona, right? 12 to 22-year-olds, probably more so than any demographic, probably know themselves the least and are figuring it out. So is some of it maybe not on us in a way to really accept who we are and have that intimacy with ourselves?
Totally. That's a really good question, because I actually, in the first draft of this book, I didn't have anything about that, about like getting closer to yourself. And my editor was like, you're kind of expecting that people have done a lot of self-work already. And she was right. I was kind of assuming that. So there is a chapter in there now about how to do knowing and caring with yourself. Self-care is actually a big thing right now. Like, if you're kind of in the self-help world, self-care is like a very trendy thing right now. But it's real. It works. Making time for yourself, and doing the things that kind of replenish you are pretty important. And getting to know yourself, of course, your own needs and values and motivations.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Yeah.
We'll go back. Ron? Oh, no, go ahead. So I was going to say, I identify as an introvert, right? And I very much so enjoy getting to know myself and thinking through my emotions and feelings. And sometimes it's super energizing, but I notice it hits this point where it becomes pretty isolating.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendation how we can balance it better, or flags we can look for in ourselves to know when we are recharging versus like going into a lonely hole?
Yeah, there is a version isolating yourself or being alone that's really positive. It's like solitude. And I'm totally an introvert too. And I think that my introvertedness seeps through into the book. It kind of has that perspective that assumes that sometimes people like to be alone. But like I said, the loneliness versus closeness thing is really, really subjective. So if you kind of are keeping tabs on how your aloneness is making you feel, you can probably identify when that switch starts to happen. The thing about loneliness is that it's really bad when you feel like you can't stop it. Like when you feel like, okay, I'm aware that it's switched over into this feeling bad thing, but I don't know what to do. So that was the issue that I was trying to kind of speak to.
So as long as you have tools to get out of it, once you notice it, it'll be all right.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of times people ask me, like, are you a people person? My response is, I like to be alone until I'm lonely.
Right.
You know, right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's how it is.
So multi-part question.
Okay.
All related to my 12-year-old daughter. And I could probably ask you a lot more afterwards.
Yeah.
But because you mentioned that you stopped lonely when you were 13, right? Is there a section in your book which kind of talks a little bit more about your background at 13 years old and your state of mind? And so that's one part. The other part is this book suitable for a 12-year-old? Like if I give this to my daughter to read, is it suitable? And the last part associated with that is, what do I say if I give her this book to read and say, I attended this talk at Google, I thought it was fascinating, here's a great book, and I'm almost saying, I think you're lonely, but she might not feel lonely.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I also,
So I'm not sure if that one got caught, but just to reiterate, so this for your teenage daughter, right, would this book be appropriate for her, and if you were to get it for her, what would be a good way to present it, rather than being like, I think you'd like this.
I know, it's an aggressive title.
Yeah, very aggressive.
It is. I fought for it. I like the title, but yeah, it is. So I think, okay, I'm going to do second question first. Yes, I think it would be appropriate for her. It's about all relationships, not just romantic or dating, or it applies to family relationships and friends. So yeah, I think it's appropriate. I would probably present it as like, this is just a book about relationships, or how to interact with my 12-year-old. But try to make it more about just like, here's a book about like social skills or something than about loneliness, because that might be insulting potentially.
Exactly, yeah, insulting.
Yeah, it can be. And I forgot your first question. What was the first one?
Because you wrote the book, or whether or
about
not
me.
about yourself, do you cover how your state of mind was at 13 years old and your journey?
I didn't talk about, I only actually talk about my own story at the very, very end, and it's about me as an adult, but I can talk about it now. I thought I was depressed, because lonely wasn't really a thing in my mind, and I kind of think that there's quite a number of people who think they're depressed, when really it's about this issue more than anything else. But I don't know, I was a good kid, so I just kept going with it, and then eventually I was old enough to know that it probably wasn't really my fault. Like I was being nice to people. Yeah.
I'll comment if you don't mind, because I was a super angsty teen. And the number one thing I felt was misunderstood, right? And I think it was very much so because I was changing every day and I had a really hard time getting to know myself. And then, so I constantly felt misunderstood by everyone around me. Because even if they understood who I was yesterday, that's not who I am today anymore, because I'm changing a lot and I'm becoming a grown man and like all this
No, yeah.
And that's what it was. And then when I finally kind of got to a more like state where I'm like, oh, okay, this is who I am, I started being able to share that with people more, and then they could actually understand me. I would say that's the number one adjective I felt in my teenage years.
I love how you called out that, focusing on the number of friends or social media contacts doesn't necessarily get you where you want, that it's almost a fallacy to look for closeness just by quantity. Another thought that I had was, you mentioned, Dave, just now kind of being misunderstood. I feel like part of the problem sometimes with loneliness is you just don't feel like there's people who get you or can relate to you.
Yep.
And everybody has their own flavor of that. For me, I went to a very predominantly Caucasian Catholic, high school, and I come from like this Buddhist family that's vegetarian and doesn't drink. And so throughout college, especially, you mentioned kind of feeling lonely in college. Everybody's at the frat house, and I'm the only one who, like, nobody sort of gets me.
Yeah.
Now, I thought, and I might be wrong in this, that if I just find people like me, that intimacy will be there. But I look around today at my closest friends, the ones who we totally get each other, they're not necessarily of the same background as me, but we have that closeness. So do you have to find people who are like just like you?
No.
Okay.
No, you do not. In the studies that have been done, like official research, social science studies, it tends to pan out that people who are more like each other do like each other more. But that's also, it's a self-reported thing. So they may sort of be, the way that being like each other helps is that you don't have to do quite as much work in the knowing department. Like, you can just say, I'm Buddhist and I'm vegetarian, and somebody who else is like that will make that connection instantly. So there's a little less heavy lifting, but it can be done with anybody who's willing to open up. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to stay on friendship for a little bit. You just mentioned offhand that people ask you for friendship pickup lines, right? A, do you have one you might be willing to share? And B, I feel like I moved here and I didn't know anyone, and I went through this period where I felt like I was like dating friends. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And like, can you talk about that experience and what, I don't know, your thoughts on that?
I think San Francisco is like a hub of that because so many people are transplants. I actually grew up here, so I did not have that exact experience. But yeah, my advice around that kind of thing is, if you can tolerate it, start out in groups. Meaning, like, go to something that's like an interest-based group or something like that. But go there seeking somebody who you would want to hang out with outside of the interest. So meaning, like, let's say you like rock climbing. A way to meet people is to go to a rock climbing club or something. But then try to identify somebody who you would want to hang out with not rock climbing. And then those will end up being your people.
That's really good, tangible advice. I think the book is full of good, tangible things like that. That's
I'm
really
trying.
cool. Yeah. It's hard to, how do I make a friend, Kira?
I know.
You know, I don't know.
The hardest ones are the love ones, the love questions, because who knows? How do people fall in love? I don't know.
Been working on it. So I guess back to love and relationships, you wrote an article online last week that said that single men are way lonelier than single women, which I agree, but it's just that single women are like a little more ready to admit it, right? So I feel like a lot of men, like, and I see this like amongst my friends and peers, feel the need to take on like the lone wolf mentality, like I like being alone even though I don't want to. You're like, why do you think men feel the need to do that? And how can I, as like a somewhat emotionally available man, like help my friend be like, it's okay to be lonely now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is conditioning. I think that some of it is the way that men are raised. But this is a fascinating question for me because I thought that the whole knowing plus caring equals closeness thing I thought it was very gender neutral. But the more I've talked to men, they've been like, this isn't really like how men get close to people, or it's not really realistic or something. And I didn't get it, but I've been starting to get it. And I think that this not wanting to show any problems in your social life is a big, big part of it. In just the way that men are taught to be.
Yeah, do you think it's legitimate that they say this won't work for men, or do men have been conditioned to, make it not work for them? For me, I related to it very much. I thought it was a good formula. Like, you know someone and care about them, you'll become close to them. I thought it made perfect sense and aligned with a lot of the experience I've seen in my real life.
I think that for guys, so the book basically takes the romantic component out of it, because then it was going to be about intimacy, and then it couldn't apply really to friendships and family in the same kind of way, and I didn't want to go there. But I think that the intimacy, meaning like romantic types of relationships, I think that men are they need that a little bit more than women do. Like, totally non-romantic female friendships are very common, and they're quite a bit more easy for women to develop. And I think it's how we're socialized, personally. Eons of women have been sitting around weaving talking to each other and becoming friends. But for men, it's been a little bit different. And our brains are ancient, you know.
There's a lot of studies out there that says like the majority of men lose a lot of their close friends in their 20s because they don't have people.
They do, and there's this idea of closeness in the doing, is what it's called in the social sciences, where men think that they stay close to each other by doing things together, and they kind of don't. Like they think if they go golfing with their friend for 20 years that they know stuff about them, and then at the end of those 20 years they're like, I don't really know that guy at all. We're just friends, you know?
Yeah. So I think we have time for about one more. I'd like to offer it to someone in the audience if they'd like to finish us off. But if not, I have one we can close out on. All right. So it's Friday. It's National Unplugging Day too.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's
and,
right.
So I assume a lot of people will be going out and doing social things tonight. You said something in the book that I identify with very much. You say, I found mediocre social interactions only made me more lonely. Right, and I agree with that very much. You think like going out and being with friends will make you feel good, and then you go home and you just feel more alone than before it started.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations of how we can take mediocre social interactions to closer social interactions? You know, if you're at this party making this nonsense small talk, or even feeling like you don't connect with any of the people,
Yeah.
how can we change that?
I'm going to say something a little fruity because I feel like it. I think the one thing you can really do is be a little braver, be a little bit bolder, because the people that tend to, and this is a generalization, but the people that tend to feel that way are the more timid people in social interactions, especially groups. So ask a question that you think might be a little too personal, because probably they won't mind. It's much more likely that they won't mind than that they'll be offended or something.
All right.
That's my advice.
I like it a lot. So folks, Stop Being Lonely, Kira Asatryan, available in the back for $10. Kira, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.